Hey, it's Matt Bennett, grain marketing consultant with Beck's Hybrids. And so, come talk about markets again here this week. I was hoping to go from the combine cab, but that just didn't materialize. Actually, we got 3/10 of rain here, not last night, but the night before last, which equaled the previous 50 days. It was actually more than the previous 50 days that we'd had here on our farm. So, definitely been dry as can possibly be. We had laggard success last week. I mean, it was just kind of hit and miss here and there. Those of you that read the newsletter probably read that, but for those of you that didn't, essentially we're able to harvest some soybeans again. Uh, Basically, it was April planted, and we were able to get onto some lighter dirt, a little bit of a yield drag from the black ground. I'm going to say around 10 bushel, but we kind of expected that with what as dry as what we were, and so, essentially, um, we just keep getting into the corn just a little bit too wet. And so we're running, anywhere from 22 to 24. We're a couple of points wetter than what we'd really like to be. But ultimately, it's going to happen any day here. Massive, rapid dry down for most folks here. We've heard of guys talking in a week that they've lost 8 or 9 points. It just continues to dry down really good. One thing I would say, in our part of central Illinois is that we didn't have, the rainfall like I already suggested. Late July was about the 25th is the last time we got really good measurable rain. And so actually, as far as the fungicide, it held for us. We didn't see a lot of disease come in. So I do have a few slides that I'll run through. Again, I'm hoping next week I can come to you from the cab. It will keep me from even having to come up with a whole lot of content here. But what I want to do is I want to come in and share just a few different things that I've been looking at. And so let me get this pulled up and ready to go. Right here. Okay, so we're going to come to this slide first, and I just want to look at, for instance, the drought monitor. And so obviously, you look at this drought monitor, and it's essentially, hopefully you can see it. I'm seeing it on one of my screens, not seeing it on the other. But with the drought monitor, it's similar to a year ago. But obviously, there's a large portion of the Eastern Corn Belt that has just been dry as a bone, over the last month and a half. And so clearly, I talked about this a little bit last week, but clearly, you're just in a situation, where you've got to think later beans are going to really struggle. And so my personal opinion here, as we saw our light ground struggle somewhat, is that lighter ground planted late is really going to struggle. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't know that I am. And so, you look at, what we've seen over the last 133 years, my region right here in central Illinois is clearly, the driest we've seen in the last 133 years. And you can see here, it's in the last month, and so it's probably going to be reflected in later yields more so than early yields. Early bean yields have been fantastic. I mean, quite frankly, most of the folks we've talked to, relatively speaking, have been happier with their bean yields than what they've been with their corn yields. And so, you've got to expect that, early on, people are going to say, hey, I think this crop is there. Later on is where I really get into some question marks. You can see the precipitation we've had over the last week. And again, my area kind of came up short. I think one thing to note is there's some areas in the Western Corn Belt that are getting rain that they probably don't want at this stage of the game. And so you might get into some harvest delays, if you will. That's certainly not something you want to see this time of year. I've heard about people from Kansas all the way up into North Dakota in some areas receiving multiple inches of rainfall, which again, that's not good for harvest. I mean, in our part of the world, we've actually been able to cut soybeans as early as 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. And I know of people who've started before 7 because it's been so dry. Now, this morning, we've got fog. And that's part of the reason why we're not running. We're actually going to pick some corn here over the next, over the next few days. So, essentially, you're looking at, I want to show you. Hopefully, you can see this. I'm getting a little bit of feedback here, and said that they cannot see my screen. Hopefully, you can see this now. I don't know one way or the other. I want to show you what we looked at previously. There's your drought monitor. There's your precipitation ranks. And then, this is the rainfall over the last week. So the Brazilian real versus the dollar is actually rallied here. And if you can't see it, I'll just explain it. So essentially, when the real rallies, it makes our our corn and soybeans, which is what we're mostly talking about here, more competitive on the world market. And so, looking at this right now, I mean, you've got to expect that we're going to continue to see good export activity if we're basing this versus Brazil. But yesterday we came out and found out that essentially Argentina was dropping their export tariff, their export taxes, if you will. And clearly that's a problematic situation. And so, I guess in my opinion, it's one of those deals where, over the long haul, you're probably looking at us losing some business to Argentina. And so it's very frustrating. Corn shipments are still good, but as far as soybean shipments, there's just nothing going on there. And so bottom line here is that, my personal opinion, we're going to see this reflected in future reports. And bottom line is that your WASDE reports are probably going to have to scale back on soybean exports. And so, you look at the disappearance of corn, and it's actually been awfully good over the last few years. The September 30th report will basically be how much corn and soybeans did we have at the end of the marketing year. And essentially, we had all kinds of corn in parts of the country. The problem is in other parts we didn't. So the Eastern Corn Belt basis has been phenomenal for corn. Western Corn Belt, it's been junk. And so, my personal opinion is that you could actually see a little bit of an uptick in available supplies versus what we saw previously, which is problematic to say the least, because we don't need any more bearish influence on this market. As far as soybeans go, we didn't have a ton of soybeans, but overall, I mean, it's one of those deals where you're probably still fighting an uphill battle due to the fact that Brazil just harvested a huge crop. They still got a fair amount of soybeans that they can export. Argentina, same situation. So with them dropping their taxes, I mean, their export taxes, I mean, that is a problem. But next week's September 30th report, don't sleep on it. There's definitely the chance that you could see this market actually head in the wrong direction, especially on corn. I think that you could have some situations where, we inject maybe a couple 100 million bushels of corn into the balance sheet that we didn't necessarily think that we had. What will they do? They'll take that for the WASDE report in October, and they'll plug that into your old crop stocks, which is certainly going to balloon, your new crop balance sheet, if you will. Now, what are we all going to be looking for in October? Well, are we going to see another yield reduction? And so in our world, we've been getting yield reports from all over, and so essentially we've been getting yield reports from people throughout the Corn Belt, corn and soybeans. And what we do is we just share them internally within our group. There's a lot of areas, for instance, around Des Moines, Iowa, for instance, obviously all kinds of rainfall this year, but we're hearing from a lot of growers that are saying unless they sprayed fungicide twice, they're seeing yields well below a year ago, which I think there's other parts of Iowa that are going to be well above a year ago. It's going to take some time to sort this out. But getting back to my discussion on East versus West, you look at these basis levels, essentially you've got some massive issues, especially in the northwestern part of your corn belt, if you will, Dakotas, High Plains, call it what you want. But bottom line is you've got areas that just simply have plenty of grain and they don't need the grain right now. So basis levels are extremely wide. You look at soybeans, same type of situation. Part of the problem with soybeans is once again that you don't have this export situation working in our favor. And so the interior elevators, or the elevators that are not along the river, they're not having to bid to be able to get those soybeans against, for instance, the river. The river doesn't have near as hot of a bid. Typically, this is our export shipping window. This is when we're shipping a ton of soybeans out of the Gulf to go to China. And unfortunately, we just don't have that. Another problem that we've got, is our river levels are so low. And so river levels are below normal pool, which you get much below normal pool, and then all of a sudden you can't float barges down the river that are full. And so essentially what that does is it makes the shipping costs go up, which once again is problematic towards basis. But one thing that I think that you're going to see with the way that we finish this weather pattern here at the end of the growing season is you're going to see basis levels in the east stay very strong, because you have to continue to feed the market, out on the East Coast with a lot of hogs and a lot of birds. And the bottom line is they don't grow enough out in that part of the world to be able to satisfy the demand. And so you're going to continue to see a tug on corn to go out to the East Coast, soybean meal. There's going to be a lot of basis implications here. Meanwhile, in the North Dakota, South Dakota, the unfortunate reality is that shipping costs to get out there is not going to work very well. So there's certainly going to be a lot of arbitrage talked about. How are we going to be able to get bushels to where they need to go? But whenever it gets right down to it, what we're going to be looking at, in my opinion, is it's going to take us some time to sort through this. Now, again, I've talked about this. I'm going to continue to talk about it. I think old crop is going to be in plentiful supply. I think you're going to see, a situation where you're going to have plenty of corn to go around. I think soybeans will be a little bit different story. I don't know how low your yield might get. The problem is with soybeans is that if you take yield down 2 or 3 bushels, I'm afraid our exports are ballooned a little too much right now with the lack of a Chinese trade deal. And so the problem is going to be, they can actually take demand away as fast as what they take supply away. And so whenever I look over at corn, again, I think the big question is, what does the grower decide to do in 26? It's something I'm going to talk about probably every week, at least to some extent. Whenever I look at fertilizer prices right here in Central Illinois, it's going to cost $100 an acre to use the same program we used a year ago. Meanwhile, December 26 corn is trading at $460. Our spring insurance price for this year is $470. And a lot of us chose not to do a whole lot of risk management in that area, because if we would have assumed normal yields, we couldn't really scratch any profit out of it. And so, I think moving forward, you'll see a little bit of a narrative shift. It'll go towards, hey, what is the grower going to plant in 26? Can we satisfy demand? That's going to be the shift, in my opinion. When that shift happens, I do think that you'll see some buying interest here, because I just don't know if we only plant 91, 92 million acres, if we can satisfy demand, especially, if we assume that there's going to be some sort of a weather market. We haven't had one the last couple of years. There were late season dryness type issues where we thought we had this massive crop, and then we had to scale it back. I mean, will we get some sort of a scare in 26? And I think if we do, your funds will step in. They'll buy this thing with, most likely fairly aggressively, and it might give us an opportunity not only, to price some 26 bushels of a profit, but maybe holding on to some of this corn and keeping corn ownership is going to pay dividends. So next week, hopefully I'll join you from the Combine Cab. Absolutely post your questions. I did get a question, is there going to be any government subsidies to help with these grain prices? And by all means, it looks like we're going to see some sort of a government program. We don't know what it is. Typically, with all the talk of government shutdown, I'm not sure that we'll be able to push this thing through. And people will say, hey, this is important enough for us to tackle right now. I know that's not what you want to hear. I think there'll be something. I just don't know when it's going to happen. So by all means, send me all the questions you've got. If you get the newsletter, you get all my contact info. But appreciate you joining in here today and watching. And again, stay in touch.